Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Matt Finance Show. This week is another one of our mini series where we talk to the winners of the recent Matt Finance Awards. Today we're joined by the team at SENDAT, who won the award for Matt Finance Education or Community Impact of the Year, which was to recognise innovative Matt Finance projects which have had a wider impact on education or the wider community. So congratulations for winning that award. Just to start, could you introduce SENDAT? Give us a bit of background on the organisation, please.
Thanks, Will. So SENDAT is obviously a multi-academy trust entirely focused on special educational needs, and within that we would include AP within that. So we formed SENDAT in 2015. We had one special school for a long while and two more joined in 2019, and then we've just opened a new free school into Norfolk for January this year, and we've just heard that there's going to be another school joining us in April this year. And we've also opened, working in partnership with some mainstream schools, we've opened a couple of mainstream units where the youngsters are on the roll of the mainstream, but the staff are ours, and there's obviously a whole sharing agreement behind that.
Okay, fantastic. So that's Lawrence, and your role is?
So I'm Lawrence Chapman, and I'm the CEO at SENDAT.
Thank you. And Sue. Sue, this is not your first rodeo on the Matt Finance Show, is it? You spoke to us.
No, it's not. So people might have heard of me through Twitter and things like that, but I'm Sue Prickett. I'm the Chief Finance and Operations Officer for SENDAT, and delighted to have won the award. Thank you very much.
No, well done, well done. Just to pick up some of the judges' comments, just to give some background into the kind of nomination itself, and why the judges felt that you were the winner. So it was about, there was lots of things that you highlighted around what you did, kind of starting off at the beginning of the pandemic, but actually how that then really kind of informed a number of things that you've done as an organisation since. But it was really around, there's lots of things. I'm trying to pick out the bits that are most pertinent. I'm thinking, well, I can't ignore that bit or that bit or that bit. But let's start with the trust CEO and finance team physically supported sourcing supplies and packing boxes filled with welfare items, food and learning resources. These went out to all pupil premium grant children and other identified families in the trust, as well as another large school for severe learning difficulties, profound and multiple learning difficulties. But it was all about supporting the most disadvantaged and putting children first, and that was front and centre of everything we did. And to be fair, you were, even in your nomination, you recognised that you weren't the only school or trust doing this over the last 2 years, but it did stand out, just the sort of things you were doing, and actually the fact that many of those things have I was going to say survived COVID, not that we're out of COVID by any stretch, but it's changed the way you operated since then as well.
Who do you want to speak, Lawrence?
Go for it, Sue. Go on.
I think one of the things that we did very quickly was actually we closed our schools in advance of the government directive to sort of close, and we sent home our children and in fact most of our site staff, including teachers, where we could, because nobody really knew what was going on, and we rag rated every member of staff and every child through the school in terms of vulnerability and who we felt needed checking up on and things like that. And that sort of helped us plan so that we reopened when everybody else closed the following week, and then got our plans into place, and we'd got our ducks in a row, and we realised that actually we do so much other than educate our children. We really support those families who were on the phone constantly, and families during that week that we were ostensibly closed, but obviously we were still maintaining contact and making those phone calls. They were so pleased to receive those phone calls and know that we were supporting them and that they weren't forgotten. And you know, the school that we helped support as well just didn't have a team behind to try and do this for them. So we said, of course, you know, we'd do it as part of a joint effort. So they gave us their list of children and we did exactly the same for them. And what sort of made us smile, the one thing that really sticks in my mind was it was Easter and we wanted to put some Easter things, and so it wasn't just, you know, your must-haves, it was your nice-to-haves as well in these boxes. And I had this grand idea of making a little Easter thing, and I there was four, we had Lawrence, myself, one of our office managers, and our head of safeguarding, packing feathers and sequins and all of these things all over us into these, little packets to go in each individual box. And I said at the time, for us, it is always just every hand on deck, because we were down, teachers and everything were supporting online, and that's who was left to do it. So we did it.
And you didn't just focus on the basics. I think that's, I don't think sequins and feathers probably qualify as basic provision, but yeah. And as somebody who leaves Easter egg shopping to the last minute every year, I know how difficult it can be to source some of those items, which in the backdrop of a global pandemic, I'm sure was a challenge as well.
Well, we did source Easter eggs as well. Waitrose came up trumps for that, and so we sourced Easter eggs and things like that. But yeah, it's not just about the must-haves. Obviously we had potatoes and all those welfare boxes, and it was before Eden Red and everything like that came out. But yeah, it's sort of really. I was reasonably new to the trust. I was only about 6 months in, and I thought this is who we are. This is what we do.
And Lawrence, this was all in a time, probably 2 or 3 months after you'd had 2 schools. So you were originally 1 school and you had 2 schools join, and then a few months later this happens. I'm sure you had your strategy and your plan all mapped out around onboarding new schools and growing as a trust. This must have been a real spanner in the works, but do you feel now we're, again, not emerging the other side, but now we're 2 months into this process, that this has perhaps helped cement that trust development piece or accelerated things that you perhaps would have done anyway?
Yes, absolutely. I think it has. I think immediately people were working together on a slightly different common purpose, and it was kind of new to all of us. So it was really good to have that cross school working together, trying to do these food parcels. And we were based at that one school, but we were trying to distribute them to everybody across our trust, for example. The rollout of testing has been another example. Later on in the pandemic, sort of January 21, wasn't it? And trying to very quickly roll that out across the trust. And I think that definitely helped win some hearts and minds around the trust. It certainly enabled some things that we wanted to do within the trust. So we were definitely moving everything online. But it was probably going to take us 18 months. I shouldn't think it took us 8 weeks in the end to have physically moved everything online, and OneDrive and SharePoint and everything else just suddenly really leapt to the forefront, and everybody could see the benefit of that. So that was really huge and helpful for us. And I think just trying to think about that wider family input and development. So Sue picked up. I think one of those lasting themes has been communication with families. It's always been important to us, but I think there's even more communication now with families on the phone and Class Dojo and those sorts of things, and that's really, really key, because even for our primary age students, of course, with a special school, you're not seeing a class teacher at the school gate when you go to pick up your youngster every day, and so making sure that we've got those really, really strong contacts was really important. So I think there, right the way across the student-facing stuff to the systems at the back and all the stops in between, there's definitely the pandemic has sped stuff up, and B, there's definitely a lasting measure for us there.
And how do you see that kind of collaborative piece in continuing or improving? I think when we spoke before, financial pooling was potentially mentioned around as a potential lever to keep that collaboration going. Is financial pooling something that is under consideration? It's something you want to do? And how do you see financial pooling in itself help you to keep that momentum?
Yeah, so I've been really keen that we weren't building a group of silos, and so as we work together, we do a lot of cross-trust work. We get the heads of each school together weekly, and that group is our main decision-making body. And what we've been moving to and have moved to quite well is delegating to sort of subgroups of that body, some of the policy writing and those sorts of things. So so a couple of the heads or I don't know, they're working on marking and feedback at the minute, for example, and we'll go and get a focus group again right across the trust to do that marking and feedback policy that then comes back into the trust. So I think it is really important for any MAT, but especially in a specialist ASCEND focused MAT, that I really want an equality of offer. So I don't want somebody to say, well, in this school we get art therapy and in this school we don't get art therapy, you know, as a concrete example. So we want to make sure that we've got that across the board, and having a very centralised trust does that. The issue is then funding the centralised trust and trying to make sense of it, and really that's where it's leading us to financial pooling. I probably should be quiet and let Sue talk for a minute or two about financial pooling. Go for it, Sue.
Well, we've had many of discussions, Will and I, about financial pooling and what it looks like and how different it looks across all trusts. And I think what we're coming back to is, you know, you stop looking at individual bottom lines at each location and you actually consider the bottom line of the trust. And as long as you're in surplus there, then, you know, the reserves that you build up at various schools can actually go to help whatever it is that you need, whether it be a capital project at one school or expanding, you know, putting another role in at central level. I very much try to work, we're developing at the moment, to work as a minimum sort of what we're giving back to schools, so that we know that, you know, individual staffing staffing would go across the trust, but individual contracts perhaps for, you know, project specific goes back to the individual schools. That we've got Van Dye students who are our highest funded students, that funding really must stay with the student. So there's a few, you know, school specific funding that needs to go back to schools. So we're trying to sort of find that balance, and just making sure that all the trustees are bought in, and also all the heads of schools are bought in, and they understand we are one trust, multi-campus. But yeah, that's where we're getting to.
And we're just about to take that to trustees, really, to explore a bit further. And actually, one of your videos, I think, was explaining potentially three different models, Will, but I think it was a really helpful message as well, in terms of saying, well, every MAT is different as well, and it's about finding your route through that. I guess the other bit that Sue didn't mention there is just that probably half of our funding is through high needs funding, and as well with the local authorities that we work with, that's termly lagged as well. So that just adds, and then we've got two schools with residential facilities, and we run boarding Monday to Thursday night. So that's another stream of funding. So it is reasonably complicated. But don't tell Sue I said it's complicated.
Just chasing it up, making sure we're getting the right amount in.
Is that part of the driver as well? Because obviously with termly lagged funding and just the difficulties around the funding climate in special, you're able to hedge those a little bit because you're able to share that risk across a greater number of things. So, you know, if one of the schools has a problem with funding, it's less likely to be such an issue because you're taking that with hopefully there's some benefits on the other side. Is that a big driver for just kind of flattening those peaks and troughs of each school's in-year funding?
Yeah, that first year that I was in post, it took our local authority almost all academic year to pay us, and you know that meant that we were nearly £1 million outstanding in the summer term, and it was pushing, and you know we're there now. We've got a schedule of payments in place, and we've worked really hard to get that, and now you know we're bang on in with their invoicing at the end of every term. And if we can, you know, that in itself is a piece of work that's made such a difference to our cash flow. And if we hadn't had that in place, when you've got 3 schools and you're looking at 45% of your funding coming from your local authority, you'd be all over the place.
Yeah, and I think because there's lots of options around models and how you implement it, and to be honest, they'll change all the time. What won't change is what Lauren said right at the very beginning around it's all about equality of offer. You know, that's the driving principle that GAG pooling really supports. It's that if you have that principle across a trust, it's not right that funding means you can't do art in that school. And we had this conversation with one of the other winners of the Matt Finance Awards just last week, and they said almost to the word the exact same thing, Lauren. They used music as their example rather than art, but it was the exact same problem. They had some schools in their trust that couldn't do good quality music provision because they didn't have specialist teachers, or they didn't have equipment, and other schools that did. And actually, as a trust, they said, yeah, this is not, geography shouldn't dictate the quality of education. We've got a minimum standard in our trust, and it's really difficult. But they were seeing financial pooling as a way of helping them get there. It's still difficult to do everything everywhere, but there's more chance if they can kind of manage that themselves. And it'd be good to kind of report back how you get on, because particularly in a special context as well, whilst the model doesn't matter at the beginning when you're thinking about the strategic reasons for doing it, it absolutely matters when it comes to implementation, because you've got to have accounts, you've got to have numbers, you've got to have budgets, and at some point the theory has to be broken down into a practical model, and it's just difficult.
Yeah, and that's where we're still definitely refining that practical model.
Yeah, but I think everybody is, and actually, and I think that also helps focus on the priorities, because if the focus is about getting the model right, and acceptance, well, it's never going to be quite right, but as long as we're providing a quality of offer, that's the important bit. And finance has to follow suit to a degree, because you've got some reporting requirements. But yeah, the model, it'll work itself out. It'll be fine. I shouldn't say that as an accountant, but
I like that confidence.
It's the right way around, the way you're doing it. Focus on the priority, and finance will find a way.
Yeah.
Just one thing, I think you mentioned challenges that you've been having around local authority funding, and I think I've seen you on Twitter, Sue, a couple of times talk about this.
Okay.
I think you're members of an organisation called NOS, is that right?
We are, yeah. So the National Network of Special School Business Leaders, Pauline Aitchison sort of started it. It's part DFE funded, and it gives the special schools a sector-specific voice, really, amplifies what everybody is going through. Everybody has difficulties getting their funding from various local authorities, particularly those schools who are working across 5 or 6 local authorities, and they all work in very slightly different ways. EHCPs are written in slightly different ways, admissions are done in slightly different ways, and it's all a bit chaotic, really, and it shouldn't be like that. And one of the big things at the moment is the supplementary grant, and how local authorities are or are not passing it on. And it was escalated by NOS and CST in a letter to Parliament that went to say, it shouldn't happen the way it is currently happening with that particular grant. So I very much thought, and in fact there was a member of the ESFA finance team at ISBL National who said we would get a grant, and I caught him afterwards with another business leader, Christine, and I said, what happens in specials though? And he said, oh, you'll get it in the same way you get teachers' pension and pay grant via the local authority, which we get at the national rate. So I get that, okay, it's at the national set rate, but this isn't a national set rate. And allocation tables came out and there was no methodology behind it. And you very kindly, Will, produced a methodology that was really simple to follow. Having put that in for our schools as though we were mainstream, one local authority we're not getting anything from, another local authority we are getting some from, but not in the same level as if we were funded as a mainstream school. So where's the equality in that?
I must admit, I didn't, when I saw the group, is it 12 months, in the last 6 or 12 months, or is it a bit longer?
I think it's just over a year now. It's quite new.
I couldn't believe there wasn't the group already, because
it's been such a support. Huge level of support. First conference is in April, and they've managed to make it free to all business roles in special schools. So you just sign up and you go at Nottingham Forest football ground if you're interested. And it has made a difference. You can go to that group and say, okay, what are you doing about ordering your taxis? Have you got a contract that does loads of taxis, or you just go to one? What are you doing about your hydrotherapy pools in lockdown? That sort of thing. It's been fantastic.
must be useful to just be able to speak to other people in your position, because I mean, from a systems perspective, we work with lots of special schools, and it really is staggering to look at the different ways. It's not that different in terms of overall funding in all cases, but it's the individual mechanisms around monthly, annually, termly, lag funding, in advance, balancing, and I'm none the wiser on any of it. So for you of all to kind of got your head around it is impressive. But to have that group there, where can you find that group? Is it
If you Google NNOSS, we should come up as your first point of call. If not, by all means, drop me an email and I will direct you. Interestingly, I was on the DFE CFO Power Hour recently. That makes me feel really, empowered. Cool. I know. And they split us off into groups, and they actually split us off for one group that was specifically SEND. And out of over 300 attendees, only 5 were SEND. And of those, I knew 3. And one of them said, "Oh, it's so nice to talk to somebody else who isn't mainstream." And hadn't heard of NOS, so we pushed NOS there as well. It's an online platform. They use emails as well, Pauline issues regular newsletters. It's also promoted by CST, or has begun to be promoted by CST as well.
Did you mention that you've had some challenges with funding, but overall, what's your relationship like with your LA, and has NOS helped you identify or understand kind of a bit more about how good or bad your relationship is?
Yeah, I have to say, I think we have a really good relationship with our LA, and they've been supportive in trying to get to the bottom of getting our funding to us on time. And also through COVID, they've been, we've been able to get in touch and get some words of advice and things from them. And NOS has helped me realise that, where lots of other people are facing difficulties, we aren't. We've been quite well supported there. So thank you to them for that.
And I guess that's just another useful use of NOS, is that if you're only networking with schools in your local authority, it's very difficult to understand whether you've got the best local authority in the world, a more challenged one, or anywhere in between. But understanding how other places have adopted or taken on particular challenges is useful, very useful in itself.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thanks very much for sharing your time, being so candid with some of those questions. It's been an enjoyable discussion as ever. Thank you very much, and all the best for the rest of the year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Thank you for your efforts. Thank you.